Hey plebe, wanna watch Dragon Ball Z? Joe, I'd rather insert a wine bottle into my rectum than ever watch Dragon Ball Z again. Jesus Christ. How about Yu Yu Hakusho? Yu Yu Hakusho? I fucking love Yu Yu Hakusho. A while back, I released a video called Dragon Ball Z Sucks Dragon Balls, in which I panned one of the most overrated television shows ever made. Little did I know how much people would love that video and agree with it, and definitely not try to cope with someone pointing out some of the worst storytelling sins in history by writing some of the most ironically funny comments I've ever read. Here's the thing though, I don't really watch anime. There are only, I think, 5 animes I've ever seen from beginning to end, and 3 of them were only 26 episodes long. 4 of the 5 were on Toonami in the late 90s, early 2000s, so a lot of my anime experience has to do with whether or not the shit just happened to be on TV when I got home from school. But I've watched bits and pieces of other animes, and yeah, it's not my thing. I dislike how uniform most animes look, how nearly all of them have the same tropes, both in the animation and the storytelling, like sweat drops. What the fuck is the deal with sweat drops? And the animation of a character's face completely changing when their mood changes? I don't know if you know this, but you can show a character's mood changing without changing their entire fucking facial structure. See? I just did it with a smiley face. But there was one anime that aired on Toonami, well, at least the first half of the show did, that, while it was on, I actually grew a real attachment to. That show was Yu Yu Hakusho. Then Toonami stopped airing it, and I never got to finish watching it until very recently. And I can say, with absolute certainty, that that attachment was completely valid. Because finally watching this show from beginning to end, I felt myself falling in love with it all over again. Yu Yu Hakusho definitely had some classic anime pitfalls. It had some moments of weakness. But Jesus Christ, this show put most of the other shows that were on Toonami back then to shame. So step into my territory, because we're talking about probably my favorite anime of all time. Yu Yu Hakusho? Bingo. And just a reminder, this review is through the lens of a person who does not watch a lot of anime. I don't know if that's going to be refreshing or infuriating. Just keep that in mind. So you may be wondering why this show. There are a lot of reviews on it, and I generally don't like to talk about a show that has a lot of reviews, unless I'm going against the grain by shitting on it. Well, I think a lot of those reviews are actually recommendations. There's the Super Eye Patch Wolf video, the Sensei Hood review, and others that are very good, but they are very spoiler-free and recommendation-heavy. Then of course there's Bonsai Pop, who is in the process of an extremely deep dive on the show, but only the first part has been released so far, and I'm more of a generalized reviewer. But in order to really review something, you gotta talk about it in detail, so eventually, there will be a spoiler warning. So because these other recommendations do exist, I'm not gonna dilly-dally too much on the pre-spoiler stuff here. Some of this will be a repeat of what you've seen in other videos, so the least I can do is keep it brief. Yusuke Urameshi is an aimless street punk from a broken home, who has a reputation for violence and whose future is bleak at best. There's Keiko, his only friend and love interest, and Kuwabara, his rival, who becomes a whole lot more to him as the series progresses. But then one day, Yusuke saves a kid from getting hit by a car, and he dies. But not quite. He's actually stuck in limbo because Spirit World doesn't know what to do with him. This kicks off a journey where he becomes a spirit detective, investigating and fighting off supernatural dangers to the human race, usually in the form of demons. Yu Yu Hakusho is roughly translated to Ghost Files, at least in context. Out of context, its literal translation has to do with hot oil on white paper. This is why you shouldn't use Google Translate. Ghost Files is actually not a good name for the show because Yusuke does not fight a single ghost, and there are actually very few ghosts in this show at all. Yu Yu is a classic shonen fighting anime. Characters reach new plateaus of power to fight increasingly powerful opponents against insurmountable odds. So if this is the kind of anime you like, you're gonna love this one. And the level of growth these characters experience over the course of the show, both physically and emotionally, is pulled off really well. The way it's conveyed is very layered and takes its time, and no character ever becomes the strongest in the universe or whatever the fuck. No one is overpowered out of nowhere. The fights themselves are also very unique to the show. Characters will constantly employ different strategies in every fight they're in, and there are twists and turns all contained within a single fight a lot of the time. This makes nearly every fight in the show incredibly engaging. Yu Yu was created by Yoshihiro Tagashi and based on his Shonen Jump manga, which I haven't read, but I do know that the show's final story arc does reflect the amount of stress he was under towards the end of the comic's run, so be warned of that. But trust me, the ride is worth it. The show was directed by Noriyuki Abe, an expert in combining lively animation and interesting sound, if this show is any indicator. Just listen to some of this. But the characters are where a lot of the magic of the show lies. There is not a single character I dislike on this show, except for this little fucker, at least at first, but then, well, he grew on me. That's because each of these characters is carefully crafted with a personality that gets them through the trials they each have to face on the show. And I'm not just talking about the fighters. Every character in this show has personality, and almost every character has a lengthy backstory. Even those who don't are at least useful or have a story arc at some point in the show. This is much better than having 50 characters be important for a couple episodes, and then just hang around because you don't know what to fucking do with them. Take Yusuke Urameshi. Yusuke is an angry kid who has a natural talent for fighting, who learns how to hone it as the series goes on. But Yusuke's upbringing has left him insecure and aimless. This series is sort of the story of him finding good reasons to fight and continue to get stronger. Yusuke is markedly different at the end of each story arc, and the Yusuke we're left with in the end is very different from the one we're shown in the beginning. Yusuke's fighting style is reliant on thinking quickly under stress, taking gambles, and drawing strength from those moments where he's able to connect to his feelings and remember what he's fighting for. Then there's Kuwabara, Yusuke's rival turned friend, possibly my favorite character. Kuwabara is the most loyal, devoted, and principled person on the show, even to a fault. The first to forgive, the first to show mercy, the person most in touch with his own feelings, and yet the biggest knucklehead in the world. Kuwabara is the heart of the show. And heart is his MO. He might be headstrong, but it's his desire to do the right thing that gives him success in battle. Kurama is part demon, part human, and so has traits of both. He has empathy and loyalty to those he loves, but exhibits absolute ruthlessness to those he despises. He is also a highly intelligent strategist and is without a doubt the smartest person on the show. His ability to analyze every conceivable angle of a situation is his greatest asset. Hiei is a pure demon, headstrong like Kuwabara, but unlike him in every other way. Hiei is a born loner and is completely comfortable being alone, only allying himself with others when necessary, and often having ulterior motives when doing so. No problem with killing, no problem with suffering. Hiei relies more on absolute hard-hitting aggressive strength than anyone else on the show. He's conceited, he's jaded, he's a cocky dick. But you will find out how he got there. Some other standout characters include Botan, Yusuke's spirit guide, who becomes such great friends with him that she often takes a human form in order to help him. Though not a fighter, Botan is often at the front of the action and takes a proactive role in most of the gang's adventures. And when she's not, she's their biggest cheerleader. Botan is like the sister Yusuke never had. Koenma, the substitute ruler of Spirit World, who, even though in the beginning seems like an annoying toddler, becomes a really well-developed character, eventually even putting his neck on the line for his spirit detective and earning the audience's respect. And Genkai, Yusuke's mentor. Genkai is a character that would earn anyone's respect. She is initially the only adult who Yusuke respects, and their relationship over the course of this series is incredible. As Yusuke grows from a hardened youth who sees her as just another person controlling him, to a person who truly loves her like family. Genkai in turn stops seeing Yusuke as an impossible-to-reach nitwit and starts seeing him as one truly worthy of her power. Those are my favorite protagonists, but then there's the others like Keiko, Shizuru, Ogre. Even these more minor characters still have personality and panache. Not to mention, the two major villains of this series, Toguro and Sensui, are also both given a ton of development, making them super fleshed out characters as well. Without this level of character dedication, this show would not be what it is. A couple of other things to sell you on. The English voice acting in this show is incredible, which is crazy because this was dubbed by Funimation, who did Dragon Ball Z. Matter of fact, a lot of these voice actors came over from Dragon Ball Z. As I said in my DBZ review, DBZ had moments of really good voice acting, but overall was not good. Too much of this shit.
Oh my.
But it just goes to show the difference that good voice directing makes, because the improvement in quality is like night and day. For example, here's a clip of Goku screaming. Now here's Yusuke screaming. Listen to that fucking difference. That's a scream. That's what a scream fucking sounds like. Justin Cook as Yusuke, Christopher Sabat as Kuwabara, Chuck Huber as Hiei, John Bergmeyer as Kurama, Cynthia Kranz as Botan, Sean Teague as Koenma, and Linda Young as Genkai. All excellent choices. Think about how many of those names were in Dragon Ball Z and how much better these vocal performances sound. That is the difference between good and bad sound direction. The animation is also very standout, especially in the fights. There's a lot of crazy looking attacks. The animation does this weird, cool slow-mo limb elongation thing. As a matter of fact, a lot of the fights use an interesting slow-mo effect. It's cool, but also kind of silly, because a character will have an entire inner monologue of thought with themselves while throwing a punch, and people do not think that fast. Unrealistic? Yes. A welcome stylistic oddity? Also strangely yes. Then there's the themes of the show, which are actually pretty deep thoughts on the nature of life and people. Two of the biggest morals of this story is that one human life has an effect on countless others, and that being human is a struggle that every person must fight. Finally, the show raises a question of whether humanity is worth saving at all. This makes for a very deep fighting anime. Oh, and one last thing, this show has virtually no filler. Dead serious. I've heard this is rare for a long anime, and filler is fucking bullshit. So that's another reason I love this show so much. I can't promise that you'll enjoy every story arc in its entirety, but I can promise you that there's not a single episode of filler bullshit in the entire show. So now that I've basically explained to you how this show is more or less the show Dragon Ball Z could have been if it was written by somebody competent, I'd like to talk in a little bit more detail. So, spoilers. The Spirit Detective arc is great. This arc is the perfect intro to the world of Yu Yu, and I love that from the get-go it already feels as though these characters are in peril. Like, none of the enemies take it easy on Yusuke just because he's green. And even though this is the only arc that has multiple main enemies, there are few enough that they're all memorable, and one of them is even a big bad who winds up being the third greatest opponent Yusuke faces in the entire show. A lot of people tend to really overlook the first 5 episodes because they're not viewed as fighting focused like the rest of the show, but they're way better than most people give them credit for. Yusuke's fight to return to life after witnessing how much he meant to people is truly exciting and touching, and introduces one of the biggest concepts of the show. One life affects the countless lives around it. This is the beginning of Yusuke learning this lesson that comes into fruition towards the middle of the show. Also, there is fighting in these episodes. Think of all the fights Yusuke and Kuwabara get in, with or without each other. Oh, it's not a fight to the death? Well, neither were the fights in Three Kings. At least in these fights, the risks are low because it's the beginning. But these episodes, on top of showing Yusuke that life matters, also showcase his relationships with Keiko and Kuwabara. And his mother, who barely appears in the show after this. If she does at all, I can't even remember. But these first 5 episodes are exciting because Yusuke does have to do stuff in them. The whole house on fire thing, the him coming back to life part, even the episode where he helps to save Kuwabara from expulsion. And when he isn't doing this stuff, the show plays out like it's a wonderful life. I really enjoyed this part of the show. Also, this part has the 2 most underrated villains in the entire show. I'm talking about these 2 piece of shit teachers. Holy shit, these 2 were just genuinely fucking evil. I kept hoping they would get theirs, and they never do. I would like to point out, though, that if your friend is in a coma, you should take him to the hospital. Like, they still need to hook him up with nutrients so he doesn't starve to death. Also, the smoke inhalation would have dead-ass killed Yusuke here. But after that, we get some real entertaining mini-arcs. The Thieves, Rando, the Saint Beasts, the Tagoro brothers, and each of these little arcs is a huge step in developing the rapport these characters have with each other. In the Thieves arc, Yusuke enters his first major battle with Goki and actually loses. He doesn't beat him till he uses his brain and figures shit out. Then of course he meets Kurama and Hiei, each interaction being a reflection of the future relationship he would have with each. There's his fight with Rando, during which his relationship with Genkai is formed, and during which Kuwabara discovers that he has spirit energy, which the show actually has been alluding to this whole time. And I love this fight because it's the first fight Yusuke is in where it really feels like he's fucked. Rando is the first villain in the show who truly puts the works on him. But that's only to prepare him for what comes next. The best mini arc in the Spirit Detective arc, the Saint Beasts. This was the part of the show that solidified Yusuke, Kuwabara, Kurama, and Hiei as a unit. Yusuke as the natural leader and intuitive chance taker, Kuwabara as the moral compass, Kurama as the strategist, and Hiei as the wild card. This is the arc where these characters have to learn to trust each other and work with each other. Their dynamics with each other also develop here. And this part of the show puts them each to the test, each with their own battles against Genbu, Byakko, Seiryu, and Suzaku. And this is paired with a direct threat to Living World as the Makai insects take over Yusuke's town. My favorite fight in this part of the show may very well be Kuwabara's fight with Byakko. When he javelins that fucking spirit sword and lands that punch that knocks Byakko off, I cheered at the TV. This would be the first of probably 30 times that happened. But Yusuke's fight with Suzaku is the real culmination of the Spirit Detective saga. Yes, they do fight the Togoros after this, but that fight was fixed, and the build-up was not on this level. Interspersed with clips of Yusuke's training with Genkai, Yusuke finally finds his reason to fight, for the people he loves. And with all the odds stacked against him, after being electrocuted again and again and again, Yusuke soundly defeats and kills his strongest opponent yet, saving Keiko, Botan, and the Living World. It's a really magnificent build-up to a great battle, and in my opinion is the crown-jeweled moment of the Spirit Detective arc. But it's not the end, because after that we have the final mini-arc, the Togoro brothers. Although not exactly the climax of the Spirit Detective saga, the Togoro episodes set up a set of elements that are very relevant to the future. Hiei's sister Yukina is introduced. Their relationship is expanded upon later. Kuwabara falls in love with Yukina. Their relationship is expanded upon later. Kinda. The Togoro brothers are introduced, and although they are pushovers in this fight, everything leading up to it solidifies their personalities and ethical codes, or lack thereof. And with Terukane and Sakyo, there lies the darkest human element in Yu Yu Hakusho. Wealthy human elites who use their connections to Demon World to wager on life, murder for their own gain, or torture for their own pleasure. These are truly the most vile set of characters in this show, with Sakyo in particular being the single most evil, vile, and unredeemable character on the entire show. But the twist is that the Togoros were always in control. They were never in any real danger, and now Yusuke has piqued younger Togoro's interest. In the final moments of the Spirit Detective saga, this impossible foe who sees something in Yusuke finally gives Yusuke the hardest test he's ever had. Win the Dark Tournament, or watch Togoro murder everyone he loves. The Spirit Detective saga is awesome, immersive, and immediately engaging, and kept me interested for the 5 smaller stories it has to tell, while telling a larger overarching one. Yusuke is going to need all the lessons he's learned so far though, because now he's about to enter a very dark place. The Dark Tournament saga is one of the most revered story arcs in anime. People often cite it as the greatest tournament arc in anime. And though I don't really have a comparison to make, it's fucking incredible. There is so much build-up, so much payoff, so much action, new powers reached, and with something real and personal on the line, as Team Urameshi is forced to fight team after team in deathmatch after deathmatch. It's true, not everyone dies in these matches, but it's assumed that one is going to, and each combatant enters the ring ready to kill. Of course, this is the arc where the Togoros truly become the big bads of the show, with younger Togoro being the first of the show's only 2 major saga-long villains. And it's great seeing Team Togoro lurking around this whole arc, popping up here and there to threaten Team Urameshi, killing their opponents with effortless ease, while Team Urameshi has to really work for their wins. It creates this impression of these guys just barely scraped by on that last win, and they still have to face these fucking unbeatable powerhouses. Not to mention, because human crime lords are in charge of this tournament, it gets fixed quite a bit, so the rules are also stacked against Team Urameshi. There are so many great moments in this arc. The debut and evolution of the Dragon of the Darkness Flame, the accidental unlocking of the horrifying Yoko Kurama, the battle against Team Ichigaki, which becomes a battle to save them from mind control that could have only been sensed by the man with the kindest heart, Kuwabara. And Kuwabara desperately trying to keep up with his 3 stronger teammates, his match losses only accentuating his great wins. Yusuke being asleep for the whole beginning of the arc, Hiei using the Spirit Sword while still managing to insult Kuwabara, being led to believe that the masked fighter is Genkai only to be thrown off by a red herring, but no, it really is Genkai. That one episode preview where Yusuke goes, "Come on, these guys aren't gonna beat Team Toguro," that actually had me cracking up. Those brief moments where they actually befriend some of the opponents they're supposed to be killing. And that's life. In this story arc, there's surprises, fun, and violence, and you can't ask for much more than that in an anime. And Yusuke's team is significantly stronger by the end of this arc than at the beginning. This is actually the story arc with the most, let's say, on-camera power scaling, and it's done at a pace that lasts the whole arc. This is also the arc where Yusuke spends the most downtime with Keiko, making it sort of the arc where their relationship develops the most. But it's Yusuke's relationship with Genkai that becomes the emotional crux of this story arc, and it is told beautifully. When she tests Yusuke and he refuses to kill her, he says the thing that encapsulates what she means to him. "You're the only person who ever taught me anything useful." So then begins the painful trial of Genkai giving all of her spirit energy to Yusuke. And when he finally overcomes it, Genkai is finished teaching him. The student has surpassed the master and graduated. But then comes one of the greatest reveals in the series, the secret history between Genkai and Toguro. Their relationship, what Toguro did to become a demon, the whole reason Genkai entered the tournament, it all happens in one fell swoop, but it also makes everything make sense. Togoro's obsession with Yusuke, his desire to fight him, and his forcing him into this tournament. Toguro, terrified of his own weakness, eventual death, and the insecurities that come along with being human, chose to become a demon. He turned his back on being human, and Yusuke learned something from this. But then it happens, the death of Genkai. After everything they've been through together, from hating how hard she was on him to loving her like the guardian he never had, the greatest relationship in the entire show comes to a tragic close. Or so he thought. And her death feels impactful. There is a moment that really struck me after she dies where we see Botan just bawling in the bathroom. That made it feel so real. And naturally, this is all meant to make Yusuke and us despise Toguro all the more. After this, we can't wait to see Yusuke rip this motherfucker's head off. So then we get to the climactic finale, Team Urameshi versus Team Toguro. And these last fights, my god, did they save the best for last. Each one of these fights is nothing short of incredible. They really brought out the stops for this one. Any of these fights could be on the level of a series finale fight. That's how fucking good they are. Each battle has twists and turns. You think it's going in one direction, then it switches it up. There's plenty of great dialogue exchanges. Each of the opponents are perfectly matched up, and each member of Team Toguro makes each member of Team Urameshi work. They actually bring out the best in their fighting capabilities. Karasu actually has some build-up before his fight with Kurama. Enough build-up to make Kurama nervous about facing him. Karasu has this weird obsession with, I think, murdering people he has a crush on because it's the ultimate form of intimacy. I think that's what I got out of this. And so he enjoys torture. My favorite moment in this fight, and one of my favorite shots in the series, is the scene where Karasu dives into Yoko, and it cuts to the stadium exploding. I really love this shot. Bui and Hiei's fight transforms Bui from the most mysterious member of Team Toguro into the most sympathetic member. He's by far the least evil member of the team, doesn't enjoy torture, doesn't threaten his opponent's loved ones. He's only there because he has to be. His goal is to defeat Toguro and become free. For all we know, he was a hero like Yusuke fighting Toguro for similar reasons. But this motherfucker is still strong and dangerous. The tile toss, removing the armor, launching Hiei's own dragon back at him in apparent victory, but then it happens. Hiei comes back from the dragon dimension, and it's revealed what all that solitary training throughout the saga did for him. That part where he says, "I am the dragon," sent chills down my spine. And that beautifully animated part where Bui launches one final, desperate, brutal physical attack against Hiei that has absolutely no effect on him is so cool. It's a shame Bui disappeared after this. He's still alive, they could have done something with him. Elder Toguro and Kuwabara is awesome because of how outmatched Kuwabara seems to be. They put the man with the honor code up against Team Togoro's most horrible sadist. And Elder Toguro has the most grotesque power. He's indestructible, loves torture, but also chooses the perfect moment to drop the news of Genkai's death to Kuwabara, dealing a low blow psychologically as well. This has the opposite effect he intended, giving Kuwabara an extra boost of strength. And then, after all else fails to destroy him, Kuwabara, in a rare moment for him, outwits his opponent with the Spirit Fly Swatter. This was not the last we'd see of Elder Toguro, but it seemed like it at the time. I'd like to quickly point out that Koenma really shows up during the finals. Before this moment, he was just the toddler boss who sent Yusuke on life-threatening missions, and occasionally gives him an egg that might hatch a monster that eats his fucking soul or something. But he sticks his neck out for Yusuke for the first time here. And then finally, the fight between Yusuke and younger Toguro. This fight shows how strong Yusuke has become, but it's still not enough until Genkai goads Toguro into killing Kuwabara, which of course is what finally breaks the mental wall between Yusuke and his feelings, bringing out his full energy. This fight is incredible. Even though it's the most static fight of the finals, every dialogue pause is actually meaningful, and those moments where there is fighting are impactful, as we see Yusuke evolve from not being able to make a scratch in Toguro to exceeding him in power. And finally discovering Togoro's motives for picking Yusuke was timed perfectly. After selling his soul for power, Toguro had no enemies or motive to fight left, and so his only driving force became finding the one person who could destroy him at his peak. He wanted closure. He forced Yusuke to give him that closure. But he also saw himself in Yusuke and wanted him to become like him. If he can corrupt Yusuke, that's his way of truly defeating Genkai, even if he loses. And after everything he's seen and been through, losing people he loved due to his own weakness just like Toguro had, Yusuke will not do it. This fight was the moment Yusuke became a man on this show. And that moment where Yusuke tells Toguro what really happened, that he didn't let go of his humanity, but ran from it because he was afraid of ever being weak again, right before unleashing his final attack and smoke in his ass. Man, this fight has layers. This show has layers. This fight closes the first half of the show, which is the coming-of-age portion of Yusuke's story. Then finally in the afterlife, it's revealed exactly why Toguro made the decision he did, and in a single episode, a whole new layer of sympathy is added to this character we've grown to despise for the last, 40 episodes of the show. His goodbye to Genkai is truly heartbreaking. Of course, Sakyo's story ends too, and man, this guy is pure evil. Toguro and Sensui at least have motives beyond seeing everyone other than themselves as playthings, and welcoming the destruction of the world because they're bored. He even welcomes his own death out of the sheer boredom of having nothing left to challenge his power. Here, Shizuru, I'm a fucking serial killer, have my lighter as a keepsake. But then the Dark Tournament saga ends with one moment that kinda sticks in my craw. I don't think Genkai should have been brought back to life. I mean, the biggest reason, of course, is her death left an impact on the characters that shouldn't have been robbed of meaning. That was an enormous moment in the show, and bringing her back sort of feels like a betrayal. But also, the method behind bringing her back didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Yes, that's the team's wish for winning the tournament, but the committee grants the wishes, right? Didn't Sakyo kill them all? It's never mentioned what grants Koenma the authority to bend the rules and bring her back. Did he make a deal with the Dark Tournament Committee? It's pretty clear that he hates this tournament. I can't imagine he would bend the rules for these psychos. It's never even really stated where the wish-granting power comes from. The Dark Tournament Committee are all human beings. Yeah, bringing her back never made a lot of sense to me. Now, don't get me wrong, she's instrumental in the next story arc, and she's one of my favorite characters, no doubt, but I would have much preferred her to be a voice guiding Yusuke in his head than this Deus Ex Machina we got. But save for this, the Dark Tournament saga is pretty much a masterpiece. It's a tournament arc that doubles as the main character's biggest developmental moment. We get to see these guys rise in power, little by little, until they win the tournament and their loved ones' freedom. They are all different for having participated in it. And though this isn't my favorite story arc in the show, it's a lot of other people's. And that's perfectly fine. There is an argument to be made over which is better, but for me, the best is yet to come. Folks, thank you so much for watching part 1 of my Yu Yu Hakusho review. Part 2 will be coming out before you know it. Please like, subscribe, and check out my Patreon link in the descriptions.